Having another movie for you guys. Now, this movie reviewing, I have been wanting to review this movie for so long, pretty much since it came out. I remember I was going to see this in the theaters. I never did. And then I was going to watch it online. I never did. And then I got the Blu-ray because I wanted to watch with my parents because the decade it took place and things like that. And also because of the fact that I wanted to have it on Blu-ray. And I finally got it on Blu-ray, and finally I've seen this movie. And that is a movie that I'm sure you guys would have expected me to watch. I just haven't gotten to watch. And finally I've seen it. And that, of course, is Everybody Wants Some. I have wanted to watch this movie ever since I heard about it for a number of reasons, mainly because it's Richard Linklater, but also because, this is a movie that he's been trying to make for 2 years now. First it was called That's What I'm Talking About, now it's called Everybody Wants Some. But I was a bit worried about this movie, I'm not going to lie, and the main reason I was worried is because the trailers just didn't really seem like this didn't feel like a Richard Linklater movie. It felt like any teen party film we've seen. It just didn't really seem like something I really was going to enjoy. I mean, it looked kind of fun, but it kind of looked like they were parodying Richard Linklater, but it looked very silly, and I really didn't really know what the movie was going to be. But then I heard really good reviews about it, and I heard that the trailers really don't do it justice, and I have to say that the trailers really don't hold a candle to this movie, because this movie, while it is very different than most of Richard Linklater's movies, I still think it's just as insightful as many of his, and I think the best comparison to this movie is for Dazed and Confused, because like that movie, this movie doesn't really have much of a plot, okay? That's definitely something I'll say, and I'll also say that I really loved Everybody Wants Some. I think it's a very fun movie, definitely really enjoyed it, and I watched it in probably one of the best points in my life, really. I'll talk about why, but let's get to the plot of Everybody Wants Some, which I really do like the plot to this movie, which, like I said, there isn't really much of one. We focus on this guy, Jake Bradford. He's our main character. We're focusing on a bunch of different characters, but we're mainly focusing on Jake Bradford, played by Blake Jenner. He's moving into this old college house, basically, and he's there for baseball because he's going to baseball at this college, and basically, it's him trying to get used to his teammates and get acclimated to the setting, kind of deal with that transition from high school to college, but also trying to pursue this girl named Beverly, and that basically is the plot of Everybody Wants Him. Honestly, in a nutshell, that's really the best way I can sum it up, because a lot of this movie is just them partying or them talking. I'll talk about that in a second, but that basically is the plot in a nutshell. But obviously, the plot's not the thing that makes this movie, because the movie doesn't have much of a plot. The thing that makes this movie, without a doubt, I think, is the cast and the screenplay. Which, let's jump right into the cast, because everyone in the cast here, this is something I was really looking forward to. You have a cast here of people that have been in some really good stuff, but they just haven't been recognized in the way I think they have, and I think here they all really did a great job. I think especially the group of guys, all of them are very funny, and they all give very good performances. Blake Jenner is a huge standout. I really loved his character of Jake Bradford, because his character, while he is rebellious, and while he is kind of your typical teenager, he's more aware and more grounded than the others are. The others are engaged in all these crazy things, and they're kind of just there to have sex with women, and he's not there for that. He has a genuine reason why he's there. He actually wants to be a good student. He actually does want to focus on his studies, and I really liked his character overall. But is he just a good guy? I mean, yeah, he's a good guy, but does he do wrong things sometimes? Yes, and that's something I did like. He's not a goody two-shoes kind of guy. This is not a guy that's, gonna stay home at nights when people are partying. No, he does party, he does smoke, he does drink, but he's a guy that tries to focus on his studies, and he tries to be a little bit more grounded. He drinks responsibly, and I really liked his character overall. I think Blake Jenner did a really good job. I really have always liked him since his Glee days. I think just the character of Ryder, people didn't really get behind that character just because of the character he played, but I've always really liked him as an actor. I think he's very talented, and I'm glad he did a very good job in this movie. Who I really loved, though, was Zoey Deutch. I thought she was really great in this movie. I really loved her character overall, especially the character of Beverly, and I really like seeing the developing romance between these two. It takes a while for them to actually get into it a little bit, but once they got into it, I thought it was very cute. I thought they had very good chemistry, and Blake Jenner's one of those guys where, even though he's married to Melissa Benoist, he just has fantastic chemistry with anyone he really works with, and I think that's something we really do see with someone like Zoey Deutch. I mean, I saw her earlier in Dirty Grandpa. She was very good there. I'm glad she is really doing great work, because she did a really great job here. I really liked her character, not just because she's a theater major, not just because I find Zoey Deutch very attractive, but also because I really liked their romance overall. I thought it was very cute. I thought it was very well done, and it's one of the best parts about the movie. I definitely really did enjoy it, and I think overall that central romance is definitely one of the best parts here. As far as the other guys in the cast, they're all great. Will Britton, Ryan Guzman, Tyler Hoechlin, J. Quinton Johnson, and Wyatt Russell, they all really give great performances. However, the standout without a doubt, and I'm so happy I'm saying this, is Glen Powell. Holy shit, Glen Powell. I mean, I cannot praise this guy enough. It seems like anything I see Glen Powell in, I just love his character. He's kind of playing the same character he's playing in Scream Queens as Chad Radwell, but he's also kind of different because while he is very much that guy that just kind of wants to hook up with girls, he's also kind of crazy and he's very much high off his rocker a lot. And there are a lot of things he says that are very intelligent. And that's something I did like is that while he is, he's not really responsible, but he is definitely intelligent, but he just doesn't really see it. And that's something I do like. He kind of uses intelligence a little bit to flirt with girls, and you definitely see a lot of Chad Radwell in him, but he's also hilarious throughout this entire movie. He had me cracking up so much. I thought his character was so funny. I love what he did in the movie, and I'm really just loving Glen Powell as an actor. I think he really is fantastic. He's probably one of the funniest guys working today because you can give him anything and he'll be very funny. With especially a character like this, I think he's a very funny guy. I can't wait to see what else he does, and I'm glad he did this because he really was funny. I also loved Wyatt Russell's character, Charlie Willoughby. This is a guy that's just high on his rocker throughout the entire movie, just gibbering, just going on and on about like loud music or just like chords into music. It's hilarious to watch. We all know someone like that, and I think he did a really great job. I really did like his character. The other characters like Ryan Guzman, Tyler Hoechlin, I don't think they were bad necessarily. They just don't stand out like those two do. Those by far the standouts. Glen Powell, Wyatt Russell, those two were definitely the standouts for me. But I thought as a whole, the cast overall, they worked very well together. I thought they all worked very well. They all looked like they were having a great time, and you really did feel like these were kids in the 80s. These were, teenagers in the 80s going to college, and I think they did a very good job with that. I really appreciate that, and I thought that definitely was very well done. So the cast obviously is really good. Now, let's talk about the directing here, because a lot of people say this movie does not feel like a Richard Linklater movie. And honestly, I feel it's kind of the point. Mainly because I think Richard Linklater wanted to make a smaller type of film. I think he saw what he could get from Boyhood, and how that movie, while it did have a plot, it didn't have a ton of stuff going on, because we went through just his life and things like that. That was the plot. It's kind of like this movie, but the best comparison I can make to Everybody Wants Him is not Boyhood, actually. The best comparison I can make is Dazed and Confused. In Dazed and Confused, you have a bunch of different characters that we're focusing on, and half of them are going from high school to college, and half of them are making that transition from middle school to high school. And I think he did that really well in this movie, is that this is kind of like a party movie, but it's also very insightful, and I think the tone here was very well done. This movie's a lot of fun, definitely. It's very optimistic. There's nothing really down about this. This is definitely probably the most uplifting Richard Linklater film you ever watched. This is the only Richard Linklater film that doesn't end, not super depressing, but super ambiguous, because he likes to end his movies very ambiguous, where you don't really know how it's going to go, and this movie, I think he didn't do that. He actually ended very optimistic. I like where he ended overall, and I think, like I said, probably one of the most positive movies, definitely. But the screenplay here, I think, is a lot better than people are making it out to be. Yes, it is a very fun party film, and yes, I had a great time watching the movie. I had an absolute blast watching it. It's so fun to watch, and it's just a really fun movie. I definitely will say that. But it has some really great messages of, don't just be a follower. Be a leader. Try to be like, the character of Jake. The reason that Jake is such a great character, in my opinion, and the reason why we should be like Jake in this movie, and I'm not just trying to get preachy here, but the reason, I think something the movie's trying to say is don't just follow the crowd. Do what you want to do. If you want to get the girl, get the girl. If you want to be, something that they don't think you want to be it. And, don't just give in to people. And I think that's something they showed very well. It also is a great message of, transitioning, of how not all of your transition is going to be as easy as you think, how you might be very confident coming out of high school, but you're not going to be as confident coming into college, and especially, I will say by the end of this movie, everyone pretty much has a rude awakening. All the freshmen in this movie, they pretty much have a very rude awakening, and there is a very freshman hazing type scene with Everybody Wants Them. Is it as good as the Dazed and Confused scene? No, and I will say I don't think this movie is as good as Dazed and Confused. I definitely will say that. I think Dazed and Confused overall is a better film, but this movie does have stuff like Dazed and Confused, and that's something I definitely really did enjoy. In fact, just like Boyhood, some of the best scenes in this movie are just people having conversations. Probably one of my favorite scenes is between Blake Jenner and Zoey Deutch, where they're just talking about life and what matters. They're starting to get closer, and they're just, in a pool and everything, and they're talking, and it's one of the best scenes in the entire movie. I really loved it. Little scenes like that are great. There's tons of partying in this movie, and it's a lot of fun, but really, when you peel back some of the layers and you really get into these characters, the movie really does do it, especially in the third act when it starts to get a little bit dramatic. dramatic. I wouldn't say it gets completely dramatic, but you still start to get a little bit more insightful. You start to get a little bit more perspective on some of these characters, and that's something I think Richard Linklater did very well. This is something where these aren't unlikable characters. These are just guys that you see, and they're not stereotypes either. And that's something I did like, is that they're not really stereotypical characters. These are just, the more, the junkies and the ones that just want to get laid versus the one that actually wants to do well in school. And that's, I think, the best way to characterize it, for me at least. It's also extremely hilarious. I was laughing my ass off throughout this whole movie, mainly because it's extremely nostalgic. And even though I wasn't alive in the 80s, this movie is just so embedded in the 80s. And it's willing to take every 80s thing you can possibly think of, but it's not there to make fun of it. It's more there to be like, the 80s was a great decade. We're going to remind you how great of a decade it was. And I think they showed that very well here. It's really weird to see, teenagers hanging out without cell phones or without all this stuff. It was really cool to watch, seeing them having to actually talk on a phone or things like that. I mean, stuff that you just don't really see nowadays. And I think there was something that was really well done. I really enjoyed that a lot. And then the soundtrack to this movie, I just love every song. I was watching this with my mom. She knows like every song of this movie. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that overall. Probably one of the best soundtracks of the year without a doubt. I really love 80s music, I have to say. Not just because my parents played all the time. I just think it was a really fun decade and had some really awesome songs. Songs were much differently crafted then, and you definitely see that here. I really enjoyed that. The movie does take place in 1980, so you do get some disco-esque songs in there, which disco is fine. I don't really have a problem with it. If you don't like disco, you're not going to like it. My dad hates disco, so, I don't think he liked that too much, but I definitely really enjoyed that. I thought that was a lot of fun, and I really liked the, nods to the 80s in there. Like I said, there's a lot of really great 80s references and things like that in here. I also really like the cinematography of this movie, because this movie, very much, I think the best way you can sum it up with the cinematography is that it feels like a movie that was made in the 80s, but was done now, and it really does feel the way. I mean, even though it's made now, it really does feel like a classic 80s party film, and I really appreciate that. I mean, that's something that you don't really see a lot. A lot of times it's like, oh, they're making fun of the 80s, or, oh, they don't really understand the 80s. Like Dead of Summer, for example. That's a great example of a show that doesn't really feel like it's in the 80s. I mean, I watched that show, and yes, I am still watching it. I'm going to review it once I get to it, but, that's a show that just doesn't feel like it's in the 80s, and this movie does feel like it's in the 80s. You feel that tone, I mean, just from the hairstyles, and the clothes they're wearing, and the ridiculous things they're saying, and the phrases they say. There are so many different things about the 80s, and I think they showed that very well. They just showed how different the 80s were, but it also shows how not different the 80s were. There are so many things in this movie that are still happening today, and I really did love that, and the movie, I think, is just as relatable as it is, and honestly, the best time to watch this movie, I think, was now, because I'm gonna be a senior in high school, and I'm going through that transition where I'm going to be going off to college, and, after senior year, I'm going to be going to college, and I think it's, like, probably one of the perfect times to watch this. If you're a senior, or if you're going to college, you should watch this movie. Definitely, I would recommend that, and, that's something I definitely say. The editing here I thought was great, too. The movie really did fly by for me. The movie's almost 2 hours long. I was into it the whole time. I thought it was so fun to watch. I never was bored. I never looked away at the screen. I always was having a great time. By far, like I said, one of the best times I've had watching any movie this year. Overall, guys, Everybody Wants Some is just a blast. I love this movie. I think it was so fun to watch. But like I said, it's a lot different than I think people are saying. A lot of people are saying, oh, it's different from other Richard Linklater movies. And I really feel that was the point. He wanted to make a more, more fun film, a more energetic film. And there's so much energy in this movie. And yes, the song Everybody Wants Some is in there. And, like I said, there are things in here that are much different than other Richard Linklater films. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to give Everybody Wants Some a 4.5 out of 5 or an A. I absolutely love this movie. No, it is not as good as some of his other films like Boyhood or Dazed and Confused, but it still has that great Richard Linklater stuff in here. It has some great insightful message. I think it's just a really great film to watch if you're going off to college. In fact, one of the best things I can say is that I think with Everybody Wants Some, you should watch Stand By Me, Dazed Confused, and Everybody Wants Some. I've heard many people say this is an unofficial trilogy, because in many ways it is. If you're going off to middle school, you need to watch Stand By Me. If you're going off to high school, you have to watch Dazed and Confused. If you're going off to college, you have to watch Everybody Wants Some. And I think that's the best comparison I can draw. But overall, guys, let me know if you guys saw this movie, have seen it. I absolutely love this movie. One of the best times I've had watching a movie all year. Probably one of my favorite movies of the year as well. I really did enjoy this movie. It's going to be on my best list of 2016. No, not at all, but I still really did enjoy it overall. I think it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be, especially if you saw the trailers. This movie's a lot different than the trailers make it out to be. Let me know what you guys thought this movie, have seen, love to hear your thoughts on it, and we'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for, I think, a classic movie review or for Outcast, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.